Imagine a world where every thought you have, every word you say, and every choice you make are all monitored, twisted, and controlled. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But what if I told you that this dystopian vision isn't just fiction? What if George Orwell's warnings about surveillance, propaganda, and the erosion of truth are more relevant today than ever before? In this video, we're diving deep into the chilling world of George Orwell, unpacking the powerful lessons from 1984 and Animal Farm, exploring how these timeless works shine a light on our own struggles with freedom, manipulation, and the paradox of striving for good in an imperfect world. Stick with me, because what you're about to discover might just change the way you see the world and yourself. If you're someone who values truth, justice, and humanity, then this video is for you. Before we dive in, take a moment to support this channel by hitting that like button, subscribing for more thought-provoking content, and sharing this video with your friends. And if you'd like to help us create even more, consider donating through the Super Thanks button or leaving a comment to let us know your thoughts. Every bit of your support keeps this channel thriving. Now, let's unravel Orwell's timeless warnings and what they mean for us today. George Orwell, one of the most influential literary figures of the 20th century, crafted works that transcend time, offering profound insights into the complexities of human behavior, power, and truth. His life and writings are a study of paradoxes, a man of privilege yet intimately familiar with struggle, a staunch advocate for democratic socialism yet an unrelenting critic of totalitarianism. Orwell's works, especially Animal Farm in 1984, continue to resonate because they dissect the human condition with brutal honesty while warning against the perils of unchecked power and ideological fanaticism. Born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903 in British-controlled Bengal, India, Orwell grew up in an environment defined by contradictions. His family, though clinging to the vestiges of upper-middle-class respectability, struggled financially. This tension between status and reality shaped Orwell's keen sense of social injustice. Later, his disdain for the class system and its hypocrisies became a recurring theme in his works, reflecting his early experiences in preparatory schools like Eton, where privilege coexisted with emotional and social alienation. Orwell's early life set the stage for his sharp critique of power structures. After a brief and disillusioning stint as a colonial police officer in Burma, he became acutely aware of the moral compromises inherent in imperialism. This experience fueled his loathing for oppression and exploitation, themes that he explored in his early works, such as Burmese Days. In these formative years, Orwell also began identifying with what he called ordinary people, finding dignity in their struggles and resilience. This admiration for the common person is evident in his later depictions of the proletariat as both victims and potential agents of change. When Orwell traveled to Spain in 1936 to cover the Spanish Civil War, he experienced a profound ideological awakening. Initially there as a journalist, he joined the Republican militia to fight against Franco's fascist forces. It was in Spain that Orwell confronted the grim realities of propaganda and ideological manipulation. He witnessed firsthand how truth became a casualty of political agendas. Reports of battles were fabricated, heroism was falsely attributed, and the media distorted facts to suit partisan narratives. These experiences crystallized Orwell's belief that objective truth was being eroded by subjective ideologies, a concern that would become central to 1984. The disillusionment Orwell felt in Spain found a powerful outlet in Animal Farm, an allegorical novella that critiques the Russian Revolution and the subsequent rise of Stalinism. The story's anthropomorphic animals represent various social and political archetypes, with the pig Snowball and Napoleon symbolizing competing visions of power. Orwell's genius lies in his ability to simplify complex socio-political dynamics into a universally understandable tale. For instance, the initial optimism of the animal revolution mirrors the hope of real-world revolutions, while the eventual corruption of the pigs on the cyclical nature of power and exploitation. The poignant final line, "The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which," captures the betrayal of revolutionary ideals and the chilling reality that new oppressors often resemble the old. This allegory is not confined to its historical context. It reflects broader truths about human societies, where well-intentioned movements can be co-opted by individuals seeking personal gain. A modern parallel can be drawn to corporate environments, where startups initially promise innovation and egalitarianism but often morph into hierarchical institutions, mirroring the very systems they sought to disrupt. The lesson is clear. Vigilance and accountability are crucial to maintaining the integrity of any movement or organization. Orwell's magnum opus, 1984, takes these themes further, presenting a dystopian world where surveillance, propaganda, and language control are wielded as tools of totalitarian power. The novel's protagonist, Winston Smith, lives under the oppressive regime of the party, led by the enigmatic figure Big Brother. The party's manipulation of language through newspeak, a reduced and simplified vocabulary designed to limit critical thinking, highlights Orwell's insight into how language shapes thought. This concept is eerily relevant in today's era of soundbites, hashtags, and politically charged terminologies that polarize discourse and simplify complex issues. The concept of doublethink, where citizens accept contradictory beliefs as both true, resonates in contemporary society. Consider the prevalence of misinformation in the digital age, where individuals are often confronted with conflicting narratives about events. For example, during global crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the proliferation of contradictory information from various sources mirrored the disorienting cognitive dissonance Orwell described. The challenge lies in discerning truth amidst the noise, a task that requires critical thinking and media literacy skills that Orwell implicitly advocates through his work. Another striking feature of 1984 is the party's control over historical narratives. Orwell's observation that history is written by the victors is embodied in the Ministry of Truth, where Winston works, rewriting past records to align with the party's ever-changing ideology. This manipulation of history serves as a cautionary tale for the modern world, where digital records can be altered, and collective memory is vulnerable to distortion. A contemporary example can be seen in the debates over historical monuments and textbooks, where interpretations of history often reflect present-day values and power dynamics rather than objective truths. Despite the bleakness of Orwell's dystopian vision, his works carry an implicit call to action. In 1984, the phrase "don't let it happen, it depends on you" underscores the responsibility of individuals to resist tyranny. This message is particularly resonant in democratic societies, where apathy and complacency can erode freedoms. Orwell's advocacy for democratic socialism reflects his belief in a decentralized system that prioritizes equity and community over concentrated power, offering a potential antidote to the dangers he so vividly portrays. Orwell's works are not just literary masterpieces. They are moral compasses that challenge us to examine our own complicity in systems of oppression. His insights into the human psyche reveal how fear, greed, and ignorance can be exploited to perpetuate inequality. At the same time, his belief in the potential for decency and empathy reminds us that change is possible, even in the face of daunting odds. By embracing humility and fostering dialogue, we can resist the forces that seek to divide and dominate. Through Animal Farm in 1984, Orwell invites us to question authority, scrutinize narratives, and uphold the values of truth and justice. His legacy is a testament to the enduring power of literature to illuminate the darkest corners of human existence and inspire hope for a better future. In a world increasingly shaped by technology and ideology, Orwell's warnings are more relevant than ever, urging us to stay vigilant and to strive for a society where freedom and integrity prevail. George Orwell's early life and formative years were deeply marked by a unique blend of privilege and struggle, a duality that profoundly shaped his worldview and influenced his later work. Born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903 in British-controlled Bengal, India, Orwell's upbringing straddled the boundaries of class and hardship. His family, clinging to the vestiges of their upper-middle-class status, lived a life that was outwardly respectable but often financially precarious. This contradiction left an indelible impression on Orwell, giving him a sharp awareness of the disparities between appearance and reality, a theme that would later permeate his writing. Orwell's father, Richard Blair, worked as a minor official in the Indian Civil Service, a position that offered stability but not affluence. Meanwhile, his mother, Ida Mabel Blair, descended from a family of relative wealth, brought a certain air of sophistication to their household despite the financial limitations they faced. This contrast was encapsulated in Orwell's later description of his family's status as lower upper middle class, an awkward and contradictory term that highlights the precarious balancing act between social pretensions and economic reality. This balancing act became even more pronounced when Orwell's family returned to England during his early childhood. Through the help of relatives and benefactors, Orwell was sent to prestigious preparatory schools, including St. Cyprian's. These institutions were gateways to elite education, but they also exposed Orwell to the stark hierarchies of class and privilege. At St. Cyprian's, he was one of the few boys whose family could not afford the full fees, making him painfully aware of his social and financial standing. This experience of being simultaneously inside and outside the upper echelons of society gave Orwell a keen sense of alienation and resentment toward class-based discrimination, feelings he would later channel into his critique of social hierarchies. The harsh discipline and snobbery Orwell encountered in these schools further shaped his view of authority and power. The rigid structures and favoritism he observed mirrored the broader systems of inequality he would later critique. For example, Orwell often felt humiliated by the constant comparisons between students from wealthy families and those, like himself, who depended on scholarships. This awareness of inequality didn't just foster resentment. It also sharpened his observational skills and gave him a sense of solidarity with the underprivileged. At the same time, Orwell's intelligence and precocity set him apart. He excelled academically, earning scholarships to two of England's leading schools, Wellington and Eton. But even at these institutions, he found himself questioning the values and priorities of the elite class. His time at Eton, in particular, was marked by a growing disdain for the conformity and elitism that defined much of British society. Though he had access to one of the finest educations in the world, Orwell chose not to pursue university, a decision that reflected his dissatisfaction with the traditional paths of success offered to people of his background. This dissatisfaction took him in an entirely different direction when he joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma in 1922. The decision to serve in the colonial administration was in many ways a continuation of his family's ties to the British Empire, but it also marked the beginning of his deeper understanding of power and oppression. Orwell's 5 years in Burma were transformative, exposing him to the brutal realities of imperialism. He witnessed firsthand how colonial systems dehumanized both the oppressed and the oppressors, creating a moral conflict that left him deeply disillusioned. Orwell later reflected on this period with a mix of shame and clarity, recognizing how the machinery of empire crushed individuality and perpetuated cycles of violence and exploitation. His essay, Shooting an Elephant, captures this conflict vividly, recounting an incident in which he felt compelled to kill a rampaging elephant to appease a crowd of Burmese onlookers. The act, though unnecessary, symbolized the moral compromises inherent in imperial rule and Orwell's growing awareness of the ways power corrupts both those who wield it and those subjected to it. This experience sowed the seeds of Orwell's lifelong opposition to authoritarianism and his commitment to exposing the mechanisms of oppression. After resigning from his post in Burma, Orwell sought to distance himself from the world of privilege and authority that had defined much of his early life. He moved to Paris and later London, immersing himself in the lives of the working poor, taking on menial jobs and living in near destitution. He sought to understand the struggles of ordinary people. These experiences formed the basis of his book Down and Out in Paris and London, which provides a raw and empathetic portrayal of poverty. By living among society's most marginalized, Orwell not only developed a deep respect for their resilience, but also sharpened his critique of the systems that perpetuated inequality. The contradictions of Orwell's upbringing resonate strongly with modern societal challenges. Today, many people navigate similar tensions between outward privilege and hidden struggle. For instance, Individuals from middle-class backgrounds often face financial pressures that contradict societal expectations of affluence and success. This phenomenon is especially visible in the gig economy, where workers may have the education and credentials associated with upward mobility but still struggle to make ends meet. Orwell's early life serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that systemic inequalities often persist beneath the surface of societal norms. Orwell's dual identity as both an insider and outsider to privilege allowed him to see the world with unique clarity. He understood the temptations of power and the ease with which people justify their complicity in unjust systems. At the same time, he empathized deeply with those who were excluded from power, recognizing their potential as agents of change. This ability to navigate and critique both worlds became one of Orwell's greatest strengths as a writer and thinker. In essence, Orwell's early life laid the foundation for his later works, equipping him with the tools to dissect the complexities of human behavior, power, and society. His experiences of privilege and struggle were not just personal. They were microcosms of the broader tensions that define human civilization. By examining these contradictions, Orwell was able to illuminate the universal forces that shape our lives, making his insights as relevant today as they were in his time. George Orwell's journey through truth and power began in earnest during his time as a colonial officer in Burma, where he witnessed firsthand the machinery of imperialism and its capacity for dehumanization. Joining the Indian Imperial Police in 1922 seemed a logical step for someone of his background, offering stability and prestige. However, Orwell quickly grew disillusioned with the role he was expected to play. His 5 years in Burma exposed him to the stark realities of colonial rule, where the relationship between the oppressors and the oppressed was steeped in resentment, exploitation, and hypocrisy. Orwell's essay, Shooting an Elephant, offers a haunting glimpse into this disillusionment. In this narrative, Orwell recounts being called upon to deal with a rampaging elephant that had caused damage in a village. Faced with a crowd of locals expecting action, Orwell felt trapped, compelled to shoot the elephant despite knowing it was unnecessary. The act, though seemingly one of authority, revealed the deeper irony of imperialism. The colonizer, though wielding power, is also a prisoner of the system. Orwell felt he had to perform brutality to maintain the illusion of control, highlighting how imperialism not only dehumanizes the colonized, but also enslaves the colonizers in their roles. This experience profoundly shaped Orwell's understanding of power dynamics. He recognized that systems of domination require constant performance, and this performance often demands moral compromises. The elephant's death became a metaphor for the senseless destruction inherent in imperialism, where both humans and the natural world are subjugated for the sake of maintaining authority. The essay remains a powerful critique of the futility and moral bankruptcy of empire, resonating with modern discussions about the lingering effects of colonialism. After resigning from his post in Burma, Orwell returned to England, deeply dissatisfied and seeking a new direction. His disillusionment with imperialism led him to reject the privilege and conformity that had defined much of his early life. Determined to understand the realities of poverty and inequality, Orwell chose to live among the working class and destitute in Paris and London. These years were marked by struggle and hardship, as he took on a series of low-paying jobs, including dishwashing in Parisian restaurants and working as a casual laborer in London. Orwell's time in Paris and London was not just an exercise in observation. It was an immersion into a world far removed from the genteel respectability of his upbringing. He chronicled these experiences in Down and Out in Paris and London, a memoir that offers an unflinching look at the lives of society's most marginalized. Orwell described the grind of menial labor, the indignities of poverty, and the camaraderie he found among those struggling to survive. Through vivid storytelling, he brought to life the resilience and humanity of people who are often overlooked or dismissed. One particularly striking anecdote from Orwell's time in Paris involves his work in the kitchens of a grand hotel. The grueling conditions, long hours, low pay, and the relentless pressure to meet the demands of wealthy patrons provided Orwell with a microcosm of the broader class divide. The kitchen staff toiled in near invisibility, their labor essential but unacknowledged by the privileged guests they served. This experience deepened Orwell's understanding of how societal hierarchies function, with wealth and power sustained by the exploitation of those at the bottom. Orwell's reflections on this period resonate strongly in today's world, where economic inequality remains a pressing issue. The gig economy, for instance, mirrors many of the dynamics Orwell observed. Workers in roles like food delivery or ride-sharing often face precarious conditions, low wages, and a lack of recognition, even as their labor is indispensable to modern convenience. Orwell's ability to humanize the struggles of the working poor offers a reminder of the dignity inherent in all labor and the need for systemic change to address inequality. Another pivotal moment in Orwell's journey came during his observations of societal hierarchies and injustice. While living in London, he spent time in lodging houses and among the homeless, gaining a deeper appreciation for the structural factors that perpetuate poverty. Orwell noted how societal attitudes toward the poor often compounded their suffering, with stereotypes and moral judgments creating barriers to empathy and support. These insights challenged the prevailing narratives of his time, which often framed poverty as a personal failing rather than a systemic issue. Linking Orwell's awakening to contemporary global struggles reveals the enduring relevance of his observations. Consider the ongoing debates about wealth disparity, access to resources, and social mobility. In many ways, Orwell's critique of societal hierarchies prefigures modern discussions about the concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few. For example, the rise of multinational corporations has created new forms of inequality, where the labor of workers in developing countries sustains the lifestyles of consumers in wealthier nations. This dynamic echoes Orwell's understanding of how privilege and exploitation are intertwined, with those at the top often disconnected from the realities faced by those at the bottom. Orwell's journey through truth and power was also a personal reckoning with the role of language and narrative in shaping perceptions. His experiences in Burma, Paris, and London taught him that the way stories are told, who gets to speak, and whose voices are silenced can reinforce or challenge power structures. This insight would later become a central theme in his work, particularly in 1984, where language is weaponized to control thought. But even in his earlier writings, Orwell demonstrated a commitment to giving voice to the voiceless, whether through his empathetic portrayals of the poor or his unflinching critique of imperialism. The lessons Orwell drew from his experiences remain profoundly relevant in an era defined by complex power dynamics. Whether it's the ongoing impact of colonial legacies, the exploitation inherent in global supply chains, or the narratives that shape public opinion, Orwell's journey offers a lens through which to examine our own complicity in systems of inequality. His willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and to challenge the status quo serves as a model for those seeking to create a more just and equitable world. Through his writing, Orwell not only documented the injustices of his time, but also provided a roadmap for understanding and resisting the forces that perpetuate oppression. George Orwell's time in the Spanish Civil War was one of the most transformative experiences of his life, shaping his understanding of propaganda, truth, and the devastating impact of ideological warfare. In 1936, Orwell traveled to Spain, initially as a journalist to cover the war. However, he quickly joined the fight as a volunteer for the Republican side, aligning himself with the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification, POUM. This decision was not just a political statement, but also a reflection of his deep-seated belief in combating fascism and standing up for justice. Orwell's involvement in the Spanish Civil War was marked by both idealism and disillusionment. At first, he was inspired by the egalitarian spirit of the militia. The Republican forces, composed of workers, intellectuals, and farmers, seemed to embody a vision of a society free from hierarchy and oppression. Orwell described the initial atmosphere as one of genuine camaraderie, where traditional class distinctions dissolved in the face of a shared struggle against Franco's fascist forces. This environment resonated with his own beliefs in equality and the potential for collective action to create a better world. However, Orwell's optimism was soon tempered by the grim realities of war and the internal divisions within the Republican side. The coalition fighting against Franco was far from unified, consisting of various factions with conflicting ideologies: communists, anarchists, socialists, and others. Orwell observed firsthand how these divisions undermined their collective efforts, often leading to infighting that weakened their position against the better organized fascist forces. This disunity was a sobering reminder of the challenges inherent in aligning diverse groups under a common cause, especially when ideological purity takes precedence over practical cooperation. One of the most profound realizations Orwell had during his time in Spain was the pervasive role of propaganda in shaping perceptions of the war. He witnessed how events on the ground were distorted to serve the agendas of various factions. For instance, battles were fabricated or exaggerated. Acts of heroism were attributed to those who had never fought, and atrocities committed by one side were either downplayed or entirely ignored. Orwell noted that the war was being fought not just with weapons, but also with narratives, where control over the story was as crucial as control over territory. Orwell's personal experience of this phenomenon was particularly striking. The POUM, the militia he fought with, became a target of propaganda from Stalinist factions within the Republican side. The communists, aligned with Soviet interests, accused the POUM of being fascist collaborators, an allegation Orwell knew to be false. He saw how these accusations, repeated often enough, took on the semblance of truth, leading to arrests, executions, and the suppression of dissenting voices within the anti-fascist coalition. This manipulation of truth deeply affected Orwell, solidifying his belief that ideological warfare often erodes the very values it claims to defend. The impact of these experiences is evident in Orwell's later works, particularly in 1984, where the control of information becomes a central theme. His observations in Spain revealed how truth can be weaponized, not just by outright lies, but by selective storytelling and the deliberate omission of inconvenient facts. The idea that history is written by the victors became a cornerstone of Orwell's critique of totalitarian regimes, which use propaganda to maintain power and suppress opposition. The parallels between Orwell's experiences in the Spanish Civil War and modern media manipulation are striking. In today's digital age, the proliferation of misinformation and the fragmentation of news sources have created an environment where subjective truths often overshadow objective facts. Social media platforms, for example, have become battlegrounds for ideological warfare, where algorithms amplify sensationalism and polarizing content. This dynamic mirrors the propagandistic tactics Orwell witnessed, where narratives are shaped to serve political or commercial interests rather than to inform or educate. Consider the phenomenon of fake news, which has become a defining issue of contemporary society. Much like the fabricated reports Orwell encountered in Spain, modern misinformation campaigns rely on repetition and emotional appeals to shape public opinion. The ease with which false information spreads online underscores the challenges of discerning truth in an age of information overload. Orwell's insights remind us that the consequences of such manipulation are not limited to individual beliefs, but extend to the erosion of trust in institutions and the polarization of societies. Another modern parallel can be seen in the way ideological factions use media to vilify opponents. Orwell's experience with the POUM being labeled as fascist collaborators echoes the tactics of political smear campaigns today, where accusations are often amplified without evidence to discredit adversaries. This strategy is not confined to any single political ideology. It is a tool employed across the spectrum, reflecting the universality of Orwell's observations about propaganda. Orwell's time in Spain also highlighted the human cost of ideological warfare. He witnessed how ordinary people, driven by genuine convictions, were caught in the crossfire of larger political agendas. The betrayal of the POUM by Stalinist forces was not just a political maneuver. It was a human tragedy, resulting in the deaths and imprisonment of many who had dedicated themselves to the anti-fascist cause. This aspect of Orwell's experience serves as a sobering reminder of how ideological purity can dehumanize and destroy, even among those ostensibly fighting for the same goals. The lessons Orwell drew from the Spanish Civil War remain profoundly relevant in an era marked by ideological polarization and the weaponization of information. His realization that truth is often a casualty of political agendas challenges us to critically examine the narratives we consume and to recognize the complexity of conflicts that are too often reduced to simplistic binaries. Orwell's commitment to documenting his experiences honestly, even when they contradicted his own beliefs or exposed uncomfortable truths, exemplifies the kind of integrity needed to navigate a world increasingly defined by spin and propaganda. Through his time in Spain, Orwell came to understand that the fight against oppression requires more than just good intentions. It demands vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. His experiences in the Spanish Civil War were not just a personal turning point, but a profound exploration of the ways truth and power intersect, offering timeless insights into the challenges of preserving integrity in the face of ideological warfare. George Orwell's Animal Farm stands as one of the most potent and accessible critiques of power and corruption ever written. At its core, it is an allegory of the Russian Revolution and the subsequent rise of Stalinism. But its themes resonate far beyond its historical context. Orwell uses the setting of a farm to explore how revolutions, no matter how idealistic in their inception, often devolve into cycles of power and betrayal. By anthropomorphizing the animals and stripping the narrative of overt political jargon, Orwell delivers a story that is deceptively simple yet deeply profound. The novella begins with Old Major, a wise and respected pig, who gathers the animals of Manor Farm to deliver an impassioned speech. He laments their exploitation at the hands of humans, particularly their owner, Mr. Jones, and inspires them to envision a future where animals govern themselves. This vision, codified into the philosophy of animalism, is based on principles of equality and shared labor. The animals, spurred by Old Major's words, revolt and overthrow Mr. Jones, taking control of the farm in what initially seems like a triumphant moment of liberation. However, as the story unfolds, the ideals of animalism begin to erode under the leadership of two pigs, Snowball and Napoleon. At first, Snowball represents innovation and progress, while Napoleon embodies cunning and ambition. Their rivalry culminates in Napoleon using brute force his trained dogs to drive Snowball off the farm, consolidating power for himself. From this point onward, the farm's leadership mirrors the very oppression the animals sought to escape, with Napoleon and the other pigs increasingly adopting human behaviors and exploiting the other animals for their own gain. The cyclical nature of power and corruption is vividly illustrated in the pig's gradual transformation. Orwell masterfully portrays how those in power often justify their actions by manipulating language and rewriting history. The original commandments of animalism, painted on the barn wall, begin to change subtly but significantly. For instance, the rule, "No animal shall sleep in a bed," is amended to "No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets," allowing the pigs to enjoy luxuries while maintaining the pretense of adherence to their founding principles. This manipulation of language and truth serves as a powerful reminder of how those in authority can shape reality to suit their needs. One of the most chilling moments in Animal Farm comes in the final scene, where the animals look through the farmhouse window and see the pigs dining and playing cards with humans. The distinction between the oppressors and the oppressed has completely dissolved. The closing line, "The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which," captures the ultimate betrayal of the revolution's ideals. Orwell shows how power not only corrupts, but often leads to a complete reversal of the original goals, leaving the oppressed in the same or worse conditions as before. This cycle of corruption is not confined to Orwell's historical allegory. It is a universal phenomenon observable in many modern organizations and institutions. Consider the story of a tech startup that begins with lofty ideals of innovation and equality. The founders promise a flat hierarchy, transparent decision-making, and a culture of collaboration. Initially, the company thrives, attracting talent and investment. However, as it grows, power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few executives. Decision-making becomes opaque, and the values that once defined the organization are sacrificed for profit and market dominance. Employees, who once felt empowered, now find themselves disillusioned, their voices marginalized. This scenario mirrors the trajectory of Animal Farm, demonstrating how even the most idealistic ventures are susceptible to the corrupting influence of power. The danger of idealism devoid of vigilance is one of the central lessons of Animal Farm. Orwell illustrates how revolutions often fail not because of the ideals themselves, but because of a lack of safeguards against the inevitable human tendencies toward greed and self-interest. In the story, the animals place blind faith in the pigs, trusting them to lead without question. This lack of scrutiny allows Napoleon and his allies to consolidate power unchecked. The other animals, though hardworking and loyal, are complicit in their own subjugation through their passivity and unwillingness to challenge authority. This lesson is especially relevant in today's political and social climate. Across the world, movements advocating for justice, equality, and reform often face the challenge of maintaining their integrity as they gain influence. Without mechanisms for accountability, leaders can become disconnected from their original mission, and movements can lose sight of the principles that inspired them. Orwell's critique serves as a cautionary tale, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, critical thinking, and active participation in preventing the erosion of ideals. In Animal Farm, Orwell also underscores the role of propaganda in enabling corruption. Squealer, the farm's propaganda minister, is a master manipulator who uses rhetoric to justify the pig's actions and placate the other animals. He twists facts, appeals to fear, and employs logical fallacies to maintain the pig's authority. For example, when the pigs begin hoarding resources, Squealer convinces the animals that these actions are necessary for the farm's survival, claiming, "Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back." This manipulation exploits the animals' fear of regression and keeps them compliant. In modern contexts, this tactic is often mirrored in political campaigns, advertising, and media narratives that appeal to fear or loyalty to suppress dissent. Orwell's message in Animal Farm is both sobering and empowering. While he lays bare the vulnerabilities of revolutions and the ease with which ideals can be corrupted, he also implicitly calls for awareness and action. The animal's failure to recognize the pig's betrayal until it is too late serves as a warning against complacency. Orwell reminds us that the preservation of freedom and equality requires constant vigilance, a willingness to question authority, and the courage to act when principles are compromised. The timeless nature of Orwell's allegory ensures that Animal Farm remains relevant across generations. Whether examining the dynamics of a political revolution, the evolution of a corporate culture, or the rise and fall of a social movement, the story offers invaluable insights into the interplay of power, corruption, and human behavior. By exposing the flaws and failures of the animal's revolution, Orwell provides a roadmap for understanding and hopefully avoiding the pitfalls of idealism unaccompanied by accountability. George Orwell's 1984 is a haunting exploration of surveillance, language control, and ideological dominance, offering a chilling vision of a world where individual freedom is obliterated by an all-encompassing totalitarian regime. Set in the fictional superstate of Oceania, the novel follows Winston Smith, a low-ranking member of the party, as he navigates a society where every aspect of life is monitored and manipulated. Through Winston's experiences, Orwell delves into the mechanisms of power and the psychological toll of living under constant oppression. At the heart of 1984 is the party's use of surveillance to maintain control. Every citizen is watched through telescreens, devices that both transmit party propaganda and observe the populace. The thought police enforce orthodoxy, punishing even the slightest deviation from the party's ideology. This pervasive surveillance creates an environment of fear and conformity, where individuals are unable to express dissent or even think freely. The slogan, "Big Brother is watching you," encapsulates the omnipresence of authority, a concept that resonates deeply in the modern era of digital surveillance. In today's world, where smartphones, social media, and security cameras have become integral to daily life, the parallels to 1984 are striking. Governments and corporations alike collect vast amounts of data, often under the guise of convenience or security, raising questions about the balance between privacy and control. Language plays a pivotal role in 1984, serving as a tool of oppression rather than expression. The party's invention of newspeak, a reduced and simplified language, aims to eliminate the possibility of dissent by removing words that could articulate rebellious thoughts. For example, the word freedom is stripped of its political connotations, reducing its meaning to something as trivial as the absence of physical restraints. This linguistic manipulation is not just about limiting vocabulary, it's about shaping reality. By controlling language, the party controls thought, making it impossible to even conceive of resistance. This theme finds modern echoes in the way language is used to frame political discourse. Consider the use of euphemisms like collateral damage to describe civilian casualties in war, or the branding of controversial policies with positive-sounding names. These tactics mirror the party's use of newspeak to obscure the truth and manipulate perceptions. Orwell's insight into the power of language serves as a reminder to critically evaluate the words and narratives presented by those in power. One of the most psychologically disturbing concepts in 1984 is doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both as true. This mental gymnastics is essential for party members, allowing them to accept blatant lies without question. For example, the party's slogans, "War is peace," "Freedom is slavery," "Ignorance is strength," embody the paradoxes that citizens must internalize. Doublethink enables the party to rewrite history, alter facts, and maintain control over the collective consciousness. The psychological implications of doublethink are profound. It creates a state of cognitive dissonance, where individuals must suppress their instincts and reason to align with the party's dictates. This not only erodes critical thinking but also fosters a culture of submission and self-censorship. The concept of doublethink is eerily relevant in today's polarized political landscape, where people are often confronted with conflicting narratives and pressured to choose sides. Social media, in particular, amplifies this phenomenon, creating echo chambers where contradictory information can coexist without resolution. A contemporary example of cognitive dissonance can be found in the way individuals navigate politically charged environments. Imagine someone who values environmental conservation but works for a company that contributes significantly to pollution. To reconcile this conflict, they might rationalize their role by focusing on the company's charitable initiatives or by downplaying the environmental harm. This mental balancing act mirrors the psychological strain of doublethink, highlighting how individuals grapple with contradictions in their beliefs and actions. Winston's journey in 1984 illustrates the devastating consequences of living under such a regime. Initially, he attempts to resist by keeping a secret diary and engaging in a forbidden romance with Julia, acts that represent his desire for individuality and freedom. However, the party's control extends beyond physical surveillance to psychological manipulation. When Winston is eventually captured, he is subjected to brutal torture and re-education in the Ministry of Love. The party's ultimate goal is not merely to enforce obedience, but to achieve complete control over the mind, erasing any capacity for independent thought. The climax of Winston's story occurs when he is confronted with his deepest fear in Room 101, breaking his will and forcing him to betray Julia. This moment underscores the party's ability to destroy even the most intimate bonds, leaving individuals isolated and powerless. By the end of the novel, Winston succumbs entirely to the party's authority, declaring his love for Big Brother. This conclusion is both devastating and instructive, serving as a warning about the lengths to which totalitarian regimes will go to crush dissent. The lessons of 1984 are particularly relevant in an age where misinformation and propaganda are pervasive. Orwell's portrayal of the party's manipulation of truth reminds us of the dangers of unchecked power and the erosion of accountability. In the digital era, where deepfakes, fake news, and algorithm-driven content blur the lines between reality and fiction, the need for critical thinking and media literacy has never been greater. Awareness becomes the first line of defense against manipulation, enabling individuals to question narratives, seek multiple perspectives, and resist the pull of ideological conformity. Orwell also highlights the importance of collective action in resisting tyranny. While Winston's individual rebellion ultimately fails, his story underscores the limitations of solitary resistance. In contrast, movements that prioritize solidarity, transparency, and accountability have the potential to challenge oppressive systems. Orwell's work serves as a reminder that the preservation of freedom and truth requires not only vigilance but also a willingness to collaborate and support one another in the face of adversity. Ultimately, 1984 is a sobering exploration of the human capacity for both submission and resistance. It challenges readers to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of power, the fragility of freedom, and the ways in which language and ideology shape our understanding of the world. By examining the mechanisms of control depicted in the novel, we gain a deeper appreciation for the importance of protecting the values of truth, justice, and individuality in our own lives. Orwell's vision may be dystopian, but it serves as a powerful call to action, urging us to remain aware, question authority, and uphold the principles that define a free and just society. The enduring legacy of George Orwell is best encapsulated in the term Orwellian, a word that has transcended its origins to describe conditions of surveillance, manipulation, and authoritarian control. While Orwellian is often used loosely or inaccurately, its core meaning reflects the themes Orwell explored in works like 1984 and Animal Farm. The term denotes not just totalitarian regimes, but the subtle mechanisms through which language, truth, and freedom are distorted to maintain power. Orwell's insights into these dynamics remain strikingly relevant in today's world, where the lines between truth and propaganda, freedom and control, are increasingly blurred. In modern society, the term Orwellian frequently arises in discussions about surveillance. Governments and corporations collect and analyze vast amounts of data, often in ways that encroach on individual privacy. From CCTV cameras monitoring public spaces to smartphone apps tracking users' locations and habits, the specter of constant observation echoes the world Orwell envisioned in 1984. The rise of social media has further complicated this landscape, as platforms harvest personal information to curate content, shape behavior, and influence decisions. These practices, while often justified in the name of security or convenience, raise critical questions about the trade-offs between technological advancement and personal autonomy. Orwell's legacy also extends to the manipulation of language, a theme he explored through the concept of newspeak in 1984. Today, language continues to be a battleground for power, with euphemisms and redefinitions shaping public perception. Phrases like enhanced interrogation techniques for torture or collateral damage for civilian casualties sanitize harsh realities. Much like the party's slogans in 1984, the use of politically charged terms and slogans to frame debates on topics ranging from immigration to climate change demonstrates how language can be wielded to polarize opinions and suppress critical thought. Orwell's work resonates not only because of its warnings about authoritarianism, but also because of his unwavering belief in the possibility of a better society. His advocacy for democratic socialism reflects a vision of political and economic systems grounded in equality, justice, and human dignity, unlike totalitarian regimes, which prioritize power for its own sake. Democratic socialism emphasizes the importance of collective welfare while safeguarding individual freedoms. Orwell believed that a decentralized economy, coupled with political democracy, could mitigate the dangers of concentrated power, whether in the hands of the state or private interests. This belief in balance and accountability is particularly relevant in addressing the challenges of today's world. Economic inequality, environmental crises, and political polarization all reflect the dangers of systems that prioritize profit or ideology over human well-being. Orwell's critique of both capitalism and authoritarian socialism serves as a reminder that extremes often lead to exploitation and dehumanization. Instead, he championed a pragmatic approach that acknowledged the complexities of human society while striving for fairness and compassion. Applying Orwell's lessons to build a just and empathetic society begins with recognizing the value of truth and integrity. Orwell understood that truth is not merely a philosophical ideal but a practical necessity for democracy and progress. In a world increasingly dominated by misinformation and propaganda, the ability to discern fact from fiction is essential. This requires not only critical thinking but also a commitment to transparency and accountability at every level of society. Educational systems, media institutions, and governments must prioritize truth-telling and resist the temptation to manipulate information for short-term gains. Equally important is the cultivation of empathy, a quality that Orwell often highlighted through his depictions of ordinary people. In works like Down and Out in Paris and London, he emphasized the dignity and humanity of those marginalized by society. This perspective challenges us to view issues like poverty, inequality, and injustice not as abstract problems, but as lived experiences that demand our attention and action. By fostering empathy, we can begin to dismantle the divisions that often fuel conflict and inequality. A modern example of Orwell's principles in action can be seen in grassroots movements advocating for social and environmental justice. These movements, grounded in collective action and mutual aid, reflect the democratic socialism Orwell envisioned. Organizations that prioritize inclusivity, transparency, and accountability offer a model for how societies can address systemic issues without resorting to authoritarian measures. Whether through community-led initiatives to combat climate change or efforts to ensure fair wages and working conditions, these movements embody the values Orwell championed. At the same time, Orwell's warnings about the corrupting influence of power remain a crucial lesson. Even the most well-intentioned movements and organizations are susceptible to hierarchy and exploitation if vigilance and accountability are not maintained. Orwell's depiction of the pigs in Animal Farm, who become indistinguishable from the humans they overthrew, serves as a stark reminder of this danger. To avoid repeating such cycles, systems must be designed with checks and balances that prevent the concentration of power and encourage participation from all members of society. Orwell's legacy also calls for a reevaluation of how we approach political and social discourse. The polarization that characterizes much of today's public debate often stifles meaningful dialogue and problem-solving. Orwell's belief in the importance of common decency and mutual understanding offers an alternative path. By approaching disagreements with humility and a willingness to listen, we can begin to bridge divides and work toward solutions that reflect shared values. This requires moving beyond the binary thinking that often dominates political narratives and embracing the complexities and contradictions inherent in human society. Ultimately, Orwell's enduring relevance lies in his ability to illuminate the tensions between power and principle, control and freedom, fear and hope. His works challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems we inhabit and the choices we make. At the same time, they inspire us to envision and strive for a world where justice, empathy, and truth prevail. By drawing on Orwell's insights and applying them to the challenges of our time, we can honor his legacy and work toward a society that reflects the best of our shared humanity. George Orwell's warning, "Don't let it happen. It depends on you," is a call to action that transcends time and context. It encapsulates the essence of his work, the belief that the future is not predetermined but shaped by the choices and actions of individuals. This message is particularly poignant in a world where the dangers Orwell identified, surveillance, propaganda, and authoritarianism, persist in new forms. His words challenge us to recognize our agency in resisting these forces and to take responsibility for the kind of society we wish to create. Orwell's emphasis on vigilance begins with understanding the subtle ways in which power operates. Tyranny rarely announces itself with fanfare. It often creeps in through small compromises and overlooked injustices. Orwell's portrayal of the party in 1984 highlights how control is maintained not just through force, but through the manipulation of language, truth, and thought. The party's slogans, "War is peace," "Freedom is slavery," "Ignorance is strength," illustrate how contradictions can be normalized, eroding the ability to question or resist. In today's world, this dynamic is reflected in the spread of misinformation, the use of euphemisms to obscure harm, and the framing of issues in ways that prioritize power over truth. Resisting such manipulation requires humility, the willingness to admit what we don't know, and to seek understanding beyond our biases. Orwell's own journey, from a colonial officer complicit in imperialism to a writer committed to exposing injustice, exemplifies this quality. He did not claim moral perfection. Instead, he embraced the complexities of human nature and the challenges of navigating an imperfect world. This humility is essential for meaningful progress. It allows us to acknowledge our own flaws and contradictions while striving to do better. Compassion is another cornerstone of Orwell's lessons for today. His deep empathy for the marginalized, whether the working poor and down and out in Paris and London, or the oppressed animals in Animal Farm, reminds us that justice begins with recognizing the humanity of others. In a society increasingly defined by division and polarization, this lesson is more urgent than ever. Compassion bridges gaps, fosters understanding, and inspires action. It challenges us to look beyond labels and stereotypes, to see the struggles and aspirations that unite us. A powerful example of the need for compassion can be found in the global response to crises such as climate change and migration. These issues often pit communities against each other, with fear and self-interest dominating the discourse. Orwell's belief in collective action and shared responsibility offers a different perspective. Addressing these challenges requires not only practical solutions, but also a fundamental shift in how we view our relationships with one another and with the planet. Compassion enables us to approach these problems with a sense of shared purpose rather than competition. Vigilance, humility, and compassion are not abstract ideals. They are practices that must be cultivated and maintained. Orwell's works reveal how easily these values can be eroded in the face of fear, ambition, or complacency. The animals in Animal Farm begin their revolution with high ideals, but fail to hold their leaders accountable, allowing power to corrupt. Similarly, Winston Smith in 1984 begins as a reluctant rebel, but ultimately succumbs to the party's overwhelming force. These narratives serve as warnings about the cost of inaction and the importance of sustaining resistance, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The paradox of striving for good in an imperfect world is central to Orwell's philosophy. He understood that perfection is unattainable and that efforts to impose a singular vision of utopia often lead to oppression. Yet he also believed in the possibility of incremental change, of making the world a little less cruel and a little more just. This paradox is reflected in his advocacy for democratic socialism, which sought to balance the ideals of equality and freedom with the realities of human imperfection. In our own lives, this paradox manifests in the tension between idealism and pragmatism. Striving for good often involves compromises and setbacks, but these challenges should not deter us. Orwell's insistence on confronting uncomfortable truths, whether about society or ourselves, reminds us that progress is a process, not a destination. It requires persistence, adaptability, and the courage to keep going even when the path is unclear. One of the most profound lessons from Orwell's work is the importance of individual and collective action. While his characters often grapple with systems that seem insurmountable, Orwell himself believed in the power of ordinary people to effect change. His writings are a testament to the idea that resistance begins with small acts, questioning authority, seeking truth, and standing up for others. These actions, though seemingly insignificant, can ripple outward, challenging the structures that sustain oppression. Orwell's warning, "Don't let it happen. It depends on you," is ultimately a message of hope. It acknowledges the threats we face while affirming our ability to confront them. By embracing humility, practicing compassion, and remaining vigilant, we can navigate the complexities of an imperfect world without losing sight of our shared humanity. Orwell's legacy is a reminder that the struggle for justice, truth, and freedom is ongoing, and that each of us has a role to play in shaping the future. We've journeyed through Orwell's chilling dystopias, unpacked the profound lessons of 1984 and Animal Farm, and reflected on what his warnings mean for us in today's world. Orwell's message is clear. Tyranny isn't just a relic of the past or the stuff of fiction, it's a shadow that looms wherever truth is distorted. Compassion is forgotten, or power goes unchecked. But here's the hopeful part: it doesn't have to happen. As Orwell himself said, it depends on you. By staying vigilant, embracing humility, and practicing empathy, we can resist the forces that threaten to divide and control us. The future isn't written, it's shaped by the choices we make today. If this video has sparked new insights, challenged your thinking, or inspired you to act, don't let the conversation stop here. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear these ideas, and subscribe for more content that dives deep into the questions that matter most. And if you want to go the extra mile, consider supporting this channel through the Super Thanks button or leaving a donation. Your support fuels our ability to create meaningful content for a better future. Thank you for watching, for thinking, and for being part of this incredible community. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, the fight for truth and freedom starts with us. See you in the next video.